Alderman O'Brien is was getting stuck in airline traffic coming back, and he may be here later if the airlines helps him out. Okay, so this evening we're going to start with public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to present anything in public comment? Seeing none. Communications.
There are none.
Okay, department reviews. The general fund budget revenue is on page 31 in the yellow section, and the department appropriations start on page 58. But the first item we'll talk to tonight is 101, the mayor's office, appropriations on page 65. Good evening, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to address the overall kind of city hall-oriented departments, as well as obviously the mayor's office. I've given you a spreadsheet which shows all of the city hall departments together, which shows that overall we are up only 0.7% for all of these departments, and I will point out some of the high points. The goal here, and I'll tell you about some changes we've made in terms of these various departments. The goal here has been to make some adjustments, but overall to try to hit a number that was under the cap, which we obviously have done. Some of the changes that we've made are, first of all, we eliminated a position in City Hall, or we reduced a position from a full-time messenger at about $50,000 salary to a part-time position at around $16 an hour or something like that. So we've been able to reduce some considerable expenses there. There was a... Oh, you're...
Sorry, Mayor.
I thought you were up there. I don't know, he takes your seat.
I apologize.
Yeah. Everybody shift one.
Sorry I'm late.
Just grab my water.
I'm in the right seat.
So, Alderman Shoneman took Alderman Siegel's place, so...
I took Alderman McGinnis's place.
Oh, you did? I was
And just for the
thinking...
record, Alderman Siegel arrived at 7:04.
Okay.
So I was just explaining the kind of an overview of the City Hall-related departments. So we cut a messenger position, which had previously been under financial services. That's now a part-time position at a lower hourly rate, which is now under the purchasing function. We also made some other changes in welfare where there was a vacant position in administration, and we thought that that position could be eliminated, which we did do, which helped save $50,000 plus. In addition to that, we were able to reduce welfare costs based upon Mr. Mack's estimate, by $26,000. Some areas where you will see increases are first in the mayor's office, and I wanted to take a moment to discuss that. The proposal is to raise the salary for the position of Chief of Staff, or Ms. Kleiner, from roughly $61,000 to about $80,000. And the reason for that is that she has taken on, and her position has been reclassified, she's taken on a much higher level of responsibility than previous people in the mayor's office have had. Over time, the city in former years used to have the position of the Director of Administrative Services. That was held by Russ Marcoux, and then ultimately Maureen Lemieux, and I think other people. In some years under Mayor Lozo, that position was revised to be city stat, and there was a city stat department, and then at some point it was cut completely. But Ms. Kleiner has taken on the job of really helping to run City Hall. She deals as basically a peer to the division directors, works with all the division directors, and helps to direct them and work with them on multitude of projects. In addition to that, she is very involved in budget preparation. She is involved as a point person for the Board of Aldermen. You probably have all talked to her at one time or another. The school board, where she has a lot of experience as a former member, with the police department, the fire department. So she is helping to run city government. And at a division director level, which is really where she is functioning, her salary would be in the six figures. But rather than propose something like that, we've proposed a more modest increase to $80,000. Now, I just want to make it clear that in order to make room for something like that, we have made various adjustments and cuts that I already mentioned. We cut the position of messenger, which is saving us 30, 40, with benefits, probably $50,000 a year. We were able to reduce a position in welfare and achieve other savings that in the end mean that all these departments together are only up 0.7%. Now, I think there may be a couple of other highlights that I wanted to mention before we get to any specific questions. There is a $34,000 increase, which still is within this 0.7% in the human resources budget. We budgeted $34,000 for an increase in consulting and training. This is to try to accommodate the new software, and Larry can talk to you about the details of that. There's one item that that was an increase that really you don't see here, and that was $66,000 in community development. That's for weed removal, and although that's weed removal in the river, it's more of a capital project, a one-time expense, which really doesn't reflect operating costs within community development. So that is not in the spreadsheet because we were trying to give you a picture of kind of the operational, year-to-year operational costs as opposed to one-time capital projects such as that. And I think those are the main points. We have, of course, the department heads here, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay. So, Alderman Wiltshire, you have
I have a
Question?
question, yeah. Can you tell me in the welfare administration what position is not being, what position is being cut?
It's like the assistant director. So the assistant went to Concord, and we thought we could function without that.
So it's not a case tech position that,
The title, I think the person did take case work, though. What page is that?
I can tell you why I'm asking. I know some years ago, we had added case tech positions over there because there was a lot of fraud in the welfare, clientele, I guess. And we hired case technicians, and after that point, we felt like that department really had things under control, well-managed. I would really hate to see us go back to the days where we don't have enough people out there looking at what's going on. So I have a little bit of trouble with not having that position in there, unless you can tell me that there are other ways we can manage that.
Well, certainly the department is well-run. I mean, Mr. Mack is doing a very good job and has been for a long, long time. You can see the position, the positions are on page 181, and we reduce from 7 to 6. So it's the administrative assistant two, I'm sorry, is the position that's being eliminated. So the senior case technician, the intake worker, the case technician, and the welfare officer, of course, three case technicians are all still in the budget, but the administrative assistant two is the position that we eliminated.
But you said that position did some case management as well?
Well, I had, my recollection on exactly what we had done was not correct. So in the end, we eliminated the administrative assistant position. The senior case technician was vacant, but we filled that, and we did not fill the administrative assistant position.
Okay. I agree. I think they do a good job over there. They really keep things, I just don't want to see it go back to where it was, before we staffed that department the way we felt it should be staffed. Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions? Alderman Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am sympathetic to Ms. Kleiner's the workload she has. This reminds me of the last budget where we had a salary increase proposed, and it's very, very difficult to kind of say, well, I know you shouldn't get a salary increase, even though you're doing more work. We had this with the buildings manager. But it is substantial. It is fairly substantial. I do appreciate that cuts were made in other areas. And I personally am aware of the great work that Kim does, and she does do work well beyond the initial funded position. But I don't know where you go and get to that number, the significantly higher number. We're talking about 30% higher, pretty much. And I feel awkward because again, I do respect all the work that she's done, and I don't feel like I would say, well, I want to rescind that. I mean, it's kind of a terrible thing to do. Here we've taken this and take it away, but I'd be very, very cautious about this type of thing going forward. Again, I had the same statement with the buildings manager. And he was sitting here while we were debating whether or not he could keep his raise, and I felt horrified. It was just a very bad situation. So I don't know how best to describe it. I'm glad that you've decided to make it up in other ways and recognizing the excellent work that Kim does.
Let me add a couple things. First of all, I asked Kim Ms. Kleiner not to come so that you wouldn't feel awkward in discussing her position.
Yeah.
Because I thought someone might have questions. Number two, the job has been reclassified. I mean, it's not just a raise. I mean, the scope of the duties that she is performing are far more than what the previous job description included. And I have, Mr. Chair, if you would like, I have copies of the revised job description,
Sure.
which I could pass around. Mr. Budrow will help us with that. So she is performing the job really as I used to know it, the Administrative Services Director, who would be making much more than we proposed because of the difficulty of making raises. I propose that we kind of split the baby. I really think she's working at the division director level, which is more in six figures, but we proposed 80,000 so that it wouldn't be too big a bite, and still she would get some recognition for the actual responsibilities that she's performing.
Alderman Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I appreciate that, and I agree. It's always a tough thing to do. But so here, when we have our Nashua Fire and Rescue come forward, and they're going to say, well, their job scope has expanded well beyond original also. So I can't wait to see that, and this will be held up and say, well, it was done in the mayor's office, so where's, what happens at contract time for us? It's just one of those things. Again, I just feel like I'm doing my job here. So I'm advocating on behalf of what the taxpayers would rationally ask and reasonably ask.
Mayor, any response or?
No, I mean, I understand what Alderman Siegel is saying. I still think that the responsibilities that she's performing justify the salary.
I guess it would be similar to in the fire department, take a lieutenant and made another deputy chief or something. Added responsibilities, it's a whole different job description, different pay scale, rather than an increase in pay for a particular position. It's,
Well, if I might, Mr. Chairman, safe stations is specifically what I have in mind. Across the board, a dramatic increase in responsibility that wasn't in the original job description. A necessary function too, and a successful one.
any other questions? Yes.
Well,
Alderman Lopez.
to the mayor, I'm just curious, what was the administrative assistant in city welfare doing in the past?
Helping with clerical administrative work.
All set?
I mean, I guess, so I'm assuming that was passed on to the case managers. And so now some of the time that they had to work with the public or to resolve like housing emergencies or whatever is now being spent in clerical work?
Yes.
All set?
Yep.
When Mr. Mack comes in, which I think he's been in, I mean, you can ask him the details of his reaction. I mean, I think he's not ecstatic, but on the other hand, he thinks that that the reduction can they can still function effectively.
Any other questions? City clerk's office, if I follow the line right, is a reduction of almost 50,000. What was driving that?
Well, the city clerk is here, so she can tell you she can talk about the details, but basically it's because we're having less elections than we did last year. So we had so many elections last year, but this year we have only one election. And we therefore are paying less ballot inspectors, less poll workers, basically.
Okay. All right. So, and you're covering the entire list that you presented to us.
I am, but I would ask the other department heads to come up so if you have questions about their specific, I know you're going to go through their specific budgets. I'm kind of giving you an overview and.
Okay, that's what, so my
and-
question was. So we've covered the mayor's office. Actually, the next one on the list is the Board of Aldermen, and President McCarthy is going to cover that.
It's pretty simple. It's on page 72. It's
Now,
one
Mr.
step-
Chair, we also
yeah.
have Brenda Barron and Amy DeRoche from the Hunt Building, and maybe they should come up in case you have questions of them.
Crowded.
Ms. Barron is the chair of the board of directors or the advisory board regarding the Hunt Building, and Amy is, of course, the full-time employee. So I didn't mean to in any way limit your questions to these other people. I'm just to the department heads. I was just giving you an overview, explaining
Okay.
that when you combine all of the city hall related departments, we're up only 7%, or excuse me, 0.7%, less than 1%, and just giving you an overview, showing you where we made offsetting cuts to any increases that we proposed.
All right. So we'll go in the order of the departments. Next is the Board of Aldermen. President McCarthy?
What's in there is just Sue's one-step increase and the change in healthcare costs, and everything else is pretty much the way it was last year. We haven't hired a replacement transcriptionist yet. We won't do that during the budget season in all likelihood. We may do it afterwards. We're trying to assess what the workload looks like. you'll notice there's some line items in there like mileage that had some money in them last year. Because we're not gonna hire somebody right away, I think those small amounts can be taken care of out of the transcriptionist salary if we need to pay anything for them. That's only used when she's up in Concord, which I don't see any of that happening for a while now, so.
Any questions for Board Alderman? Seeing none, thank you. Legal Department. Attorney Bolton.
Thank you.
As a point, could you
Yes.
call out the pages, just?
I'm sorry, the Legal Department's on page 74.
Essentially, the payroll is what it is. Three of the people in the department are off the salary grid and get approximately 0.8% increases. The Associate Corporation Counsel moves up a regular step, so her increase is closer to 3%, just under 3%, I believe, based upon just one step to the next step. And then the other position is currently vacant. We're hoping to hire that at a reduced pay from what we paid the recently retired employee. So salary, not a big difference there. Benefits, that's going up and going up. I'm sure you're seeing it in all departments. And then the other things, I think it's up like $1,000 overall across the entire budget. It's just based upon moving some dollars around based upon the experience of the last couple of years, which I reviewed when I put this together. So out of the budget of over $400,000, I've really got control on spending of about 13.5 or something. So there you have it.
Okay. Questions for legal? Alderman Siegel.
Just quickly, I just wanted to understand why the benefits went up so significantly. What happened there?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, but I understand health insurance, the working rates have been adjusted, and that is the biggest thing.
Okay.
I don't get the health insurance out of this budget. My wife also works for the city, and according to the rules, it's paid for ostensibly out of the budget where she works. So we should be actually lower than most other departments based upon a per capita basis. But I can't estimate it. I didn't estimate it. I don't know what goes into each piece of it. That's
Okay.
someone else figures that out and they hand it to me, basically.
Okay. Fair enough.
Mr. Chair and Alderman Siegel, we have the, Mr. Budrow here, and when the benefits part comes up, we can get into where our, the details of the increase in health insurance. And that's what that and the pensions, which we've discussed many times, is what causes the increase in benefits.
Okay. Any other questions for legal? Seeing none? Okay. City Clerk's Office, so having fewer elections, so
That's correct. As the mayor has stated, we are only having one election this year in lieu of two elections. So right off the bat, our budget is already $47,595 less than last year's. The bulk of that being in the salary count. So we reduced our salary count by 42,574. Most of that has to do with the appointment in the elected officials. With our ballot inspectors, we're dropping our ballot inspectors from 10 per ward. Most of them had 10 per ward, back down to the 4 per ward. So we're reducing that line item right there by over $28,000, because also the registrars are dropping from 8 to 2 per ward. So that's our biggest reduction. We are continue to maintain, and over time, I did reduce it by $1,500. There's a lot of legislation up in the state right now that's going to put additional restrictions on our office in order to meet certain deadlines. There's a current deadline that's coming down the pike that's going to be probably not this election too hard to manage, but it's going to be much more difficult for us to meet those deadlines established by the state. If we go on under, so the salary items is that as with Mr. Bolton stated is for the benefits. Again, that's something that we have received, and I know that area only went up 3,000. When we look at Section 53, which is the professional and technical sessions, this is being reduced again by $11,000. Most of it has to do, again, with the election services. Because of the one election, there's less programming costs for the AccuVote machines, one less election to provide police coverage for, so that's almost an $8,000 savings there. And of course, some of the ward worker and ballot delivery, so we have that reduction there. Under Section 55, other services, we are increasing that by $2,900. The mileage reimbursements and conferences are going to remain the same. Some items still have to be put in for this year's budget that hasn't been put in for reimbursement. Again, with new staff, new training, making sure they stay up with their certification, and recertification is very important. Printing has increased $4,400, and because that is our election, now we have to look at printing of our ballots. I know we're also going to be having to print some new absentee envelopes because there's a law change coming in on that effect too because of a lawsuit that was filed with the state. So they've already pushed through a non-germane amendment on another bill. So that's going to be some changes for us to do. Postage, we're decreasing it by about $7,000 because we're removing the 2 ward mailings that we had for the notification of the ward changes for wards 3 and 5, and then also be able, because I deleted monies out due to the absentee ballot process, we're going to have less absentee ballots than we had in the general election. Other contracted in services, though, you'll see has increased by $5,500, and that is because now we'll have an inauguration next year. In FY16, we spent $5,193 for the inauguration, so I'm looking at that being a little more as far as the cost with the food going up. Also, we have to print invitations that we didn't have. We used our stock that we had previously, but at this point in time, we're out. We no longer have a printer, so we'll be able to have to go out and look at having those invitations printed. Supplies and materials under Section 61, it's just decreased by $150, so there's not much of a difference there. It's just rearranging some monies as far as some of the accounts go, because we're finding that our copier supplies are going up because our contract's now on a quarterly basis instead of a yearly basis for overages, so we're paying a little more on that. So that is on the expenses.
Okay, and the revenues are on page 32. I noticed they went up a little bit.
Yes, they did. So on the revenues, as you know, if you look at your budget book, the revenues as of March 31st was $138,000. As of yesterday, when I ran the report, we're at $169,000. At that point, we haven't hit our licensing time. April is our big time for licensing for pawnbrokers, secondhand dealers, amusements, pool tables, and of course, dog licensing. So we will definitely meet our budget amount this year and probably exceed it. There are some accounts that right now we do not have monies in that we are low on the UCCs and the voter checklist. We are still waiting money from the state on that. I had a conversation with the state today, and we should be receiving that by the end of the fiscal year. We've also increased the money for the wedding ceremony fees because we have started offering that again. We had stopped it because I was the only JP and we didn't have staff, and then we went into the presidential elections. So I do have another JP, and we're starting to offer that service again.
Excellent. Questions for the city clerk's office? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we could
Mayor?
let Mr. Bolton or our city attorney and our city clerk go, if there are no more questions, we have some other department heads who are here.
Yeah, I just
Take-
have one other question for legal. Are the current lawsuits increasing your budget at all, or does that come out of a separate fund?
It may increase the time I spend here on Saturdays, but basically it doesn't raise my pay any.
Since you don't get overtime,
And the same goes for the other lawyers in the office. So we'll manage. I think over time, not this year, certainly, probably not next year, but over time, we may want to increase staff depending on the need. I have some ambition of using less outside counsel and rely more on in-house, which will be a savings to the city. But I think this year, we should be fine to finish this year and for the next fiscal year, we should be okay. When we're not, I'll let you know.
yep, thank you. I have no problem with letting them loose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we also have Mr. Cates, Mr. Cattignon, and Mr. Mansfield here. If they want to come up. I don't know if you want them to come up or
Sure.
now or when they get called, but.
City clerks. So the next department is 109, Civic and Community Activities on page 82. Mr. Mayor, who's covering city and community activities?
Either I or Mr. Griffin can cover this.
Okay.
The outside agencies, the money was allocated by the Review and Comment Commission based upon the bottom line that I'd given them, which was up about 1.5% or 1.4. They recommended the allocations, and I did not alter their recommendations. And you can see what they are. We're now calling it the Citizens Advisory Commission, formerly known as the Review and Comment Commission.
Questions? Alderman Siegel.
I just want to point out for those that don't realize, this committee does a tremendous amount, not the Budget Committee, but the Citizens Advisory Committee, what used to be Review and Comment. They do an amazing amount of vetting, so it'd be very, very difficult for us to comment on this in any more detailed fashion they've gone over. So I would highly recommend, and I'm sure everyone would agree, that these don't get changed, just like every year.
And I would like to second the remarks of Alderman Siegel. We have 3 commissioners. They've worked very hard, and they have involved many volunteers, 25 or 30 volunteers who've done a lot of review of the applications for each of our social service agencies. The commission was originally formed when I was mayor before to kind of take politics out of the assessment, to try to make it so the Board of Aldermen's not trying to decide which money or the mayor, who's getting what based upon us getting phone calls. It's really designed to address each of the applications on the merits, involving a lot of citizens in the process. They do a very good job, and therefore, in reliance upon their recommendations, I just submitted to you what they had come up with.
Excellent. President McCarthy.
I assume this went through the process, but I still need to ask the question from policy perspective. Why are we donating money to a taxpayer-funded charter school from the Civic and Communities Activities account as well?
Well, they submitted an application, and the Citizens Advisory Committee recommended that all of the contributions that you see be made. So I did not change anything.
I guess.
Which line item are you talking about?
56334, next to the bottom on page 82 to the Micro Society Academy Charter School.
Yes, well, there is a $900 amount there. They applied and were recommended for that level of funding by the Citizens Advisory Commission, and I did not change it.
I guess I'm asking a higher level policy question of what is the intent of the funding from that account? Because there's any number of nonprofits that don't, to my mind, this is a nonprofit, but it is not a charitable purpose.
Now, what the $900 would go for, I haven't reviewed their application, so we would need to get someone who was involved in the review to answer the detail, or we could get you a hard copy of the application. Because everybody submitted applications, and that would, I'm sure, reveal it.
I mean, I can see us next year getting more requests from, the Academy of Science and Design and the Gates City School for the Arts and any other charter school and education funding competing for nonprofit money that we typically give to, help the less fortunate.
I mean, I understand the policy point.
It could probably be easily identified if we could just get a copy of their submittal.
Yeah, we can get that.
Any other questions for this account? Okay. Next is Human Resources, and that's on page 85, appropriations. Yes, how you doing?
My
Please
name's
identify
Larry.
yourself for
I'm
the,
Larry Budrow,
okay.
Human Resources Director. I'm going to start off by telling you that we've had 100% turnover in the Human Resources and Payroll Department in the last 2 years. And that becomes important because it drives some of the recommendations that I make tonight. We're now fully staffed. We've got an energized, competent group of people, and we're getting high satisfaction ratings from our internal customers, so I'm excited about that. A material change to staffing that I seek is to increase our part-time administrative assistant from 4 to 5 hours per day. No other changes to the service level or the structure of the department. Salaries and wages are entirely based on the application of the merit grid. Because everyone is new, unlike legal, no one is off the grid in our group. Our benefits increases are also increasing, and the benefits self-insurance fund is the next department to talk about. We can address that there. I've sought $30,000 in professional services for consulting services. That's up from $5,000 this year. In this current year, I've been before the Finance Committee a couple of times, and we spent many thousands of dollars on software consulting because the Lawson ERP system is not one that was commonly in use in other organizations, and none of the people we've hired have had, with the exception of one, exposure to that system. And so we needed a great deal of help to get through this 100% turnover, and we're going to continue to need help to be able to use that system when we make changes relative to new contracts and that sort of thing. So that's the purpose of the increase in the consulting. I've also increased the request for training. Similarly, we have a number of new people. We seek to focus this year on achieving payroll certification status for our new people in payroll. And the last significant change is to increase the amount of money that we use for criminal background checks from $15,000 to $20,000. We are moving to try to use FBI nationwide criminal checks all the time now. In some cases, we need to be doing multi-state, required by law. In all other cases, it's best practice. To do a criminal record check and only do New Hampshire is kind of short-sighted, frankly. Well, people have a lot of mobility these days. And happy to entertain questions, but those are the changes and the reasons for.
Okay, questions for Human Resources? Alderman Schoneman.
Thank you. I just have a question about that, the consulting services again, the training. What's the lifespan, remaining lifespan of the Lawson system? Is this something that other people, if they're not using it, are we going to be changing away from that at some point?
That's a bigger question than human resources because it's also the financial ERP system. But we have begun to do some exploratory looks. There'll come a time that we'll need to move away from Lawson, yes.
But it's not an immediate.
Not an immediate. In fact, we just upgraded to a newer version, so we're certainly set for the time being.
Thank you.
Additional questions? All right, thank you. Benefits. That's on page 89.
Benefits.
May I begin?
Yes.
Thank you. We use the term working premiums rather than premiums because we have a self-insured health insurance plan. Health insurance costs equate to 90% of the entirety of this benefits budget. We've increased those working premiums for the first time since July of 2013, 12.7%. Because of that, we're seeking to appropriate $3.6 million additional to pay the city share. That can be seen on page 21 on the 52,300 line. I'll start there.
Okay. Question, Alderman Schoneman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are these numbers, is the need actuarially derived? Or is it an estimate based on a perceived need? How are we getting to this larger number?
The WBS Workplace Benefit Solutions has an underwriter, and in talking to her, she has described herself as a little shy of an actuary, but with insurance, industrial, commercial insurance underwriting background. And so they arrive at this number through projecting into next year, but you know, we have all of the past numbers, and if we review a history of the projections to the costs for the last several years, they've been pretty close. We have what's called a loss ratio analysis that is performed, and in all of the union contracts, I think all of them, we pay a percentage of the money of the amount of revenue that exceeds expenses, and we've been making those payments for a number of years. In fiscal 16, for the first time, perhaps ever, I don't know for sure, we did not pay a loss ratio. It was close, $44,000 on about 37 million. So, but we don't want that to happen for sure. And next year, we project for fiscal 17, we will be close one way or the other. And the claims for the last 6 months suggest to Workplace Benefit Solutions a total number that they suggested we seek revenue for 2018. So reminding you also, just my first statement, that we've had flat premiums for 4 years now.
Alderman Schoneman.
Is there a report that they generated that lays that out for us that we could have as part of the budget process?
Yes, we can certainly provide you the reports they've provided us. Yeah.
And in that report, it says 3.2 million, essentially. It says this is the new rate that they would recommend.
Yes. Well, let me clarify that. It says the rate of the working premium increase, right? So it talks about how many premiums should we gather from all sources, but premiums that we gather from all sources are the employees share, retirees pay 100%, some of the employees, the city's share of some of the employees' premiums are paid because they're grant funded or enterprise funds, so they're not appropriated. So what the information from the insurance company will show us is why we should change the working rates and increase those by 12.7%. The appropriation is the city's share for those employees not remarked upon by a moment ago.
The city share of that 12.4% increase.
Yes.
You want me to give you a little more explanation, I
Sure.
think? So what working rates, because this is a difficult area to get into, what working rate, since we're self-insured, we don't get like a bill from a company saying, you know, for each employee, it's $14,000 or whatever. So what because we're self-insured, we're estimating what the total cost of healthcare for everyone is going to be. And so the working rate is the total cost of healthcare for all employees divided by the number of employees tells you what the amount per employee is going to be. And then based upon dividing that annual number by 12, you come up with a quote working rate per month. Based upon that, if the working rate were $2,000 or say $1,500 a month, then the city's share of that is maybe 70% or 80%, depending on the type of plan that the person elects. The employee share is 20 or 30%, and they are billed for that 20 or 30%, and the city has to appropriate money to equal our 70 or 80% share, depending on the type of election that the person is making, HMO or point of service plan. The city's share is paid in some cases, as Mr. Budrow said, by a grant. Like if a person is a grant employee, meaning someone working, say, on the lead grant, or and their pay and benefits are being paid out of this federal grant, then the employer share comes from that grant. Or the Title I employees in the school department, same thing. Their pay and benefits is covered by the federal grant, so we don't appropriate here the city's share, but it comes from the grant funds. But in the end, the working rate is the rate that we estimate will be spent on average on each employee. That was not sufficient. The working rate for fiscal 2017 was not sufficient to cover the costs. Based upon that experience and experience of previous years, the consultant has recommended that we move the working rate up to 12.5% to cover the costs in fiscal 18, and the working rate, which will cover all costs, requires that the city's appropriation, that the working rate go up 12.6%, and that the city's appropriation go from 23 million to 23.5 to 28 million, or to 23.5 to 27 million, roughly, to cover the increase in the working rate.
Thank you. Since we don't buy insurance, this is not to buy insurance on a marketplace. This is a self-funded program, so we must have a fund balance somewhere. Where's our fund balance stand? We must have some pot of money that we're
So the
collecting
fund
money into.
balance, and that's one thing we're worried about. The fund balance has, over the course of, and Larry's got the exact figures here, but over the course of since 2013, has come down by, it's come down over the past 4 years from 17 to 10 million. And based upon the experts, 10 million is about as low as we should let it go. That represents about 3 months fully funding everybody, is at $10.5 million. So we don't think we can go below, we don't think we should go below $10 million. That's what the experts suggest. I mean, you can, but that's not a good practice. And so to make sure that we don't draw down any further on that balance, we need to increase the working rate, hence the appropriation by 12.6%.
Thank you. Do we envision it going up again in 19? Just kind of looking ahead to the future, do they give any indication of what would happen in fiscal 19, or is it just a one-time increase fiscal 18 and we'd stay at those rates, presumably? Any indication? I know it's hard to say, I'm just wondering.
It's hard to say.
So they haven't said anything?
No.
Okay. Is there any chance that these rates would go down? If this fund were to grow faster than anticipated or than expected, these rates could come down. And instead of being an increase from year to year, there could be a decrease. Is that possible?
It is possible. It occurred last year with our dental insurance rates. Um, I'd say it's highly unlikely. I have notes, the Harvard Pilgrim and Anthem, the two companies that we use as administrators, the trend that they've seen in their business is averaged, just give me a sec to find it if I may. They've been averaging 9.5% increase in cost a year for the last 4 years. We've been significantly under that at around 5% a year. And so it's anybody's guess, but there's nothing that I see or that I think that many of the experts see that would suggest that costs are going to go down. But it could happen.
Has it ever happened for us? Do you know? I know you haven't been around for ages and ages, but do we know if it's ever happened?
I don't know. All I know is that it's been the same since fiscal 13. I don't know the history before that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. If we could have a copy of whatever they gave, that would be
Yes,
appreciated.
I'll see to that. I made a note.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for benefits? And as several of the departments had come through, the benefit numbers were up and down, and some of the explanation was that they have employees that are now taking a different plan. It's sort of been difficult for us to figure out why the number is what it is without finding out the reason why it's that number. Is there anywhere that explains that, okay, this department went up because somebody took a family plan versus a single plan, or,
Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO.
okay?
As you probably know, this information is HIPAA protected, but I can tell you that the accounting manager, Rose Evans, goes through each and every employee and determines what plan they've taken and allocates the employer, meaning the city's costs, appropriately to the different divisions. So as the legal department indicated, the manager, the director of that department, he indicated that he doesn't take insurance, so we don't apply any cost to that. He's got a vacant position, so rule of thumb is we put a two-person cost to the city, all vacant positions. So you're going to see from year to year changes in employee makeup. As retirements, might be a two-person leaving and a single coming in. There's all kinds of dynamics going on. But prior to the calculation and the development of the budget book, we get down to that level of specificity. So if there was a question on what makes up the fire department's benefits, we have that to that level. We have the 162.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for names or even positions, but generally speaking, why that number changed, if it went up significantly, especially.
It changes because we get to that level of granularity. Prior to this, I know Mr. Budrow wasn't here, but we had all the benefits in one pot.
Mhm.
We didn't allocate pensions or benefits to the different divisions and departments in which the employees work. So it's I think it's more transparent to indicate that there is pension liabilities and benefits in the different departments that ride coincidentally with the salaries. So I think it's been a help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Additional questions for benefits? Seeing none, okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you want to let your people go as we finish with them, or?
No, I don't mind.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions for Mr. Budrow, ask them now
No?
or submit them in writing afterwards.
In triplicate. Okay, the next area is Economic Development, Department 183, and the appropriations are on 106. Mr. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the committee. just starting off with the Office of Economic Development. What you have before you is a pretty straightforward maintenance level budget where all the costs driving this budget have been either driven by fringe benefits or salary. There have been a few miscellaneous items that I would note that have increased. One is just a slight tick up in the professional services line item. That's adjusting for a contracted obligated service. And then the next is relative to supplies and materials. You'll see a slight uptick in that line item. That's due to a contract that I am proposing that we enter into called CoStar. CoStar is a proprietary commercial real estate database. It's similar to MLS, if you're familiar with the residential. It is a fundamental tenant in most offices of economic development. It is in in Manchester and Concord, so the larger communities in New Hampshire have it. The cost is split between economic development and actually our assessing department. Our assessing department and I are going to share the license. It's vital data that will help me perform my job as we move forward. Otherwise, it's a relatively straightforward budget.
Question? Alderman Shoneman.
Can you just describe a little bit about what CoStar is going to do exactly? I understand the MLS comparison, but how do you plan to use it?
That's a great question. So I'll give you a current example today. I know that there is a group currently out in the market looking for 250,000 square feet, a build to suit. So they need to find land that would be that would accommodate that type of improvement. Obviously, finding that type of acreage in northern Massachusetts or in southern New Hampshire is hard to come by. Being able to do differing type of searches would help us understand who we are potentially competing against. And I can tell you that our city has a couple sites that could accommodate that group, but being able to provide that type of data and working with the differing professional groups will help position us better to ultimately try to achieve that type of economic impact.
All set. Other questions? Okay. Yeah, it wasn't that bad, was it?
No, sir, it was not. Continuing on, Mr.
Parking
Chairman,
lots.
to parking.
And that's revenue on page 34 and the appropriations on 104.
Again, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the committee, the parking budget is very similar to the Office of Economic Development. The revenues are increasing higher than what is projected in the budget. I haven't gotten a recent estimate, but my understanding is that's around $150,000 more than the $720 that is actually printed in the book. In terms of expenses, it is, again, a straightforward maintenance budget. With no driving costs other than what we're obligated to either through fringe or salary benefits.
Questions for parking? In that budget, do we cover repaving of parking lots?
Yeah.
Where is that covered?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to get back to you. I don't know.
I think, Mr. Chair, if we were to repave, that would be reflected in the capital improvements budget.
Capital improvements? Okay. All right, any questions on parking? All right. The Hunt Building,
Yes, Mr.
93.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, the Hunt Building, and I want to thank the chair and the administrator of the Hunt Building for being here this evening. I will defer to them on any specific items. This budget is relatively straightforward, as you may or may not know. Operational budget from an expense side is to pick up 50% of the salary for the administrator. And then it is a special revenue account with it being reflected in the back pink pages. page 294. And again, this budget is a maintenance budget reflecting costs that are driven either by salary or fringe benefits.
Questions for the Hunt Building? It appears like we're getting a lot more use out of the Hunt Building these days, and it's being used a lot more effectively and efficiently. Would you like to comment on that at all?
Yeah, to know that we, the charter was to have the building become self-sustaining, self-sufficient, it is. And we continue to bring and grow the number of events that are being held there. We're looking at a few more creative fundraising ideas for the coming year. Hopefully you'll see more improvements that we'll be making to the exterior, the grounds and what have you, landscaping, that don't affect the taxpayer monies, so we're happy about it.
Excellent. Mr. Cummings?
Yes, to be clear, that would be coming out of the building's trust fund, which is a separate account from this operational budget.
Anything else for Hunt Building? Thank you. Next is telecommunications. The appropriations are on page 150.
Bruce Cognon, IT Director for the city. The telecommunications budget is staying relatively the same, except for on the cellular component. We added some tablets for the fire marshal's office and additional data plans for the fire trucks as well as the fire marshals. That's the only increase in that area.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for IT?
On the IT budget, we were able to stay within 1% increase. 1/3 of the staff is off the grid, similar to Attorney Bolton, which results in only a 0.8% increase. Bad for the staff, good for the budget. It helps us maintain that 1%. One of the other things we did in our cost savings was to bring the Lawson ERP application in-house. That's saving us $120,000 a year by doing that. It used to be hosted externally. So that saves us quite a bit in this budget. So that helped us maintain that 1% increase. The majority of my budget is made up of either salaries or software and hardware maintenance and procurement. Maintenance contracts are contractual, and contractually they increase year to year, obviously more than the 1%. So we have increases in those line items, and we have increases in the hardware maintenance line items as well. But the $120,000 savings helps us meet the target that we were set.
Excellent. Questions? Okay. Thank you very much. CTAB.
On the CTAB budget, it gets revenue from Comcast, so it basically balances out overall. The only increase we have in there is for other contracted services, and that is for an increase to the public channel funding. As you recall, when we renegotiated the contract, it was moved under.
Where is the CTAB budget?
The CTAB budget is revenues on 291, actually, and appropriations on 291.
Call out the pages.
In the pink.
All set? Additional or?
So that's essentially it. The only additional increase is for the public channel funding. That was, last year was moved out of the general fund and rolled into the, into this budget.
Okay. Questions on CTAB? President McCarthy.
I should know the answer to this, but is this fund considered in or out of the cap?
As a special revenue fund?
It's what?
It's out as a special revenue fund where the revenue is equally expenses.
So when we moved the public access channel out of the budget and into this, we took it out from under the cap, correct?
Correct. That value used to be in civic and community activities. So you're absolutely correct. I believe it was 85,000 was moved from that budget to this particular budget.
All set? Additional questions? Okay. Emergency management appropriations on page 94.
Thank you. Justin Cates, Emergency Management Director. For our budget, also pretty straightforward. Some of the changes you'll see for fiscal year 18. You'll note in the 2017 budget, there were $3,000 that was allocated. We pulled that out of part-time wages, and that was used as a match for 2 AmeriCorps members we had. If you're not familiar with AmeriCorps, they're sort of volunteers, but they're sort of not, is probably the best way to explain it. They provided a tremendous amount of assistance with our outreach programs. We're not entirely sure we're going to be able to leverage that again this year, that program. We've had an increase in part-time wages to try and continue some of the outreach programs that we have, including our Community Emergency Response Training Program and our new Until Help Arrives program. The other big change that you'll see in the 2018 budget is a significant decrease in software maintenance. Software maintenance was the Code Red contract. We're coming into year 2 of that contract, and we were able to bring that from $36,000 down to $22,000. So that's a significant change that we saw for this round. So what we were able to do is move the funding from Code Red into the part-time wages. And that's other than that, that's pretty much the only changes for the emergency management budget this round.
Alderman Siegel.
Why do we even have Code Red?
So we talked about Code Red when we were looking at reviewing the contract for it last year, and our real push to continue the Code Red service was to ensure that we're providing that capability to citizens that still haven't moved to smartphones, text messages, and those types of platforms. As we push forward, I certainly think that it's going to be important for us to review the necessity of having that service. At a minimum, we're going to need some tool to be able to leverage FEMA's IPAWS system, so that's the Integrated Public Warning and Alert System. You have to have some sort of a platform for that, but certainly that wouldn't be $22,000 a year. When the contract comes up, it's on a 3-year contract cycle. We're going to have to review, as we've done the past contract cycle, to identify the need here in the community, how many of our citizens are still leveraging legacy tools, and make a decision then on our continuing use of Code Red.
Alderman McCarthy.
How's the school district do its notifications?
They leverage a tool called Blackboard Connect. One of the things that we had done, not only the last contract revision, but the one prior to that, was to look at if there were any cost efficiencies that we might be able to promote by combining both systems. One of the challenges we ran into with doing that was a lot of that student information was protected, and it was very difficult for us to combine those two systems, which makes a lot of sense. You think we have a ton of parents and guardians within the city that could automatically be added to our citywide notification system. But because of FERPA regulations, we weren't able to do that.
Alderman McCarthy.
What does that system cost them? Is it comparable in cost to Code Red, or?
That's a good question. I'd have to look at that and see.
It may be that what we could do is just give the notification piece to the school department. And, you know, because if you sign up for Code Red, you don't have, that's not protected information.
Mhm.
So giving that to the school department so that the same system could be used may be a reasonable alternative.
Absolutely. I'm always looking for creative ways to be able to reduce that cost, particularly as we move further and further away from landline and other legacy tools.
Just for the people at home who have no clue what code red means.
Yes.
You know, could
So
you just sort of lay it out in layman's terms real quickly?
absolutely. So Code Red, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is a notification system that the city utilizes to send landline telephone calls, voice cell phone calls, text messages, emails, and social media notifications. It also has the ability to serve as our entry point into FEMA's iPause system, which is the strange tone that you'll get across your cell phone during some sort of a severe weather event, a tornado warning, something like that. We have the same ability to do that with everybody's cell phone for any other type of emergency, non-weather related. So if there was a hazardous materials incident, some sort of a shelter-in-place situation, we'd be able to leverage that same iPause system here in the city.
Other questions? One additional question I have, how come that when people have cell phones, they don't all go off at the same time necessarily? They
Yeah,
seem a
so
few seconds off.
yep. So one of the challenges that you run in on the voice side is the voice calls actually take a significant amount of time to process through the queue. So what'll end up happening is, and this is when we're making the decision on what system to use, we're looking at how many calls they can make per minute. So essentially what you're looking at is calls that are further up in the queue than you. So if you see somebody's phone go off before you, they were just farther up in the queue. You don't see that same delay with text messages and emails. Those are all basically happening at the same exact time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Citywide communications, appropriations on page 102.
Bill Mansfield, Citywide Communications. If you look at the budget, the mayor's proposed budget, my proposed budget, were a little off from each other for a particular reason. I won't get into that at this moment, but as far as the regular budget, this year the biggest increase is going to be in maintenance. We've run out of our maintenance on the Motorola system has come to an end. So we're going to start picking up some of the maintenance. We've maneuvered money from different other line items through throughout the budget to make up for that difference and to try to maintain. Matter of fact, it's actually at this point it's less than it was last year. For those of you who don't know, Citywide Communications is responsible for maintaining all radio communications within the city. There are 5 sites that we have in the city. 3 of them have antennas on them. Actually, all 5 have antennas, but for the most part, there's no communications coming out of two of the sites. Those sites are maintained by myself and another individual, as well as the equipment within. When we purchased a radio system in 2000, that radio system, which is also known as a land mobile radio system, LMR system, was mainly a bunch of boxes, and it was fairly easy to maintain. As technology has changed over the years, and as we recently purchased a new radio system, the system is now considered to be an it's information system. So it has servers in it, it has routers, it has switches, it has a lot of things that we utilize at work, such as here in the building. Any of the networks that are out there, we also have our own network now. With software, as most of you know, software is changed frequently. Hardware is changed frequently. and improvements are always being made. What ends up happening is over a period of time, the longer you let your equipment go, even if it's your laptop at home and you don't upgrade it, the less likely it's going to be operating for any period of time. When we purchased this radio system in, I believe it was the end of 2014, I had brought up at that time that Motorola has in place a process to basically make your system last longer and live longer. Through this process, you pay an annual fee. That annual fee allows that every 2 years your system be upgraded. When I say your system to be upgraded, basically they do all updates to every piece of software in the system. There are hundreds of different pieces of software that are in the system. They also upgrade your security system. They also upgrade any hardware that is no longer a piece of viable hardware. So if there's a router that's no longer being manufactured by a particular company, they'll replace it. If it's a server, they'll replace it. And it's all combined into this one package. I had proposed last year that $250,000 be placed into I think it was the software maintenance account, which is 54407. We took that out last year. I have since that time negotiated with Motorola to get the price down. And at this point in time, I had requested that the mayor include $191,000, almost $192,000 for this system upgrade agreement. It's called an SUA2, and the 2 stands for upgrading every 2 years. The problem with this is if you don't upgrade, after 5 years, you no longer can upgrade your system. The only way you can upgrade your system is if you do what they call a forklift upgrade. And that's pretty much what we went through when we upgraded our system that was in 2000. And in 2014, we upgraded it all at once. At a cost of, I think the total cost over the 2-year period was approximately $7.5 to $9 million. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the total cost was with everything. So I'm asking that the Board of Aldermen, I know that times are tough, and I know that the budget is tight. I'm asking that the Board of Aldermen reconsider and look at placing this funding back into this account so that we can stay at a level of on our communication system that is basically going to extend the life of the radio system for a period of time. Every upgrade that you do, so if we funded an upgrade for this year, if we did $191,000, we would not get an upgrade this year, in this fiscal year. The next year, we would have to throw in another $191,000, and at that point in time, we would get an upgrade. That upgrade would basically bump us from our current system as a 715 system, and we go up to a 717 system. So it's a 2-year bump. And then continuing that every year, you would get a new upgrade every 2 years. Again, it includes everything, the software, the hardware, the installation, the engineering, everything that goes into it. So I'm asking that the Board of Aldermen reconsider that.
Alderman Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is eliminated. If we put it in the budget next year, does anything change, or, I mean?
Well, the problem is, when we bought our system, which was in at the end of 2014, we ended up getting a 715 system. So
Right.
if we went and processed the upgrade last year and then funded it this year we would go up to 717. But we have not funded it for the last, we haven't done anything, we did not do anything last year. And if we don't do anything this year, we then have to If we fund it next year and then the year after, we're still only going to go up to a 717 system, and that's as high as we can go at that point, because we're behind. It's confusing, I know.
Alderman Siegel.
It's actually not confusing to me in a way, because I voted for this upgrade and this, when we did the forklift upgrade, the whole point was that we didn't want to do it again. So what are we doing here? This is the same thing I complained about with the school system. This is not right. This is not okay. We spent millions and millions of dollars, and now we're getting into the exact same situation. We're just going to fall behind, and then we're going to have to bond another upgrade. And we already bonded that. I don't know what the bond length is, but we can't create another bond to fix it. And we're in an era where people are cyber attacking everything. This is the heart of our communication system. I'm sorry to yell, but what? What's going on?
Mayor?
Well, as Mr. Mansfield said, well, first of all, the Board of Aldermen can raise or cut the budget as you desire, so.
Oh, I'm sure we'll have 10 votes for this.
But as Mr. Mansfield said, we have 5 years to engage with this. We saved $250,000 last year. The price now went down to $191. You're saying that we should preserve the option to upgrade, which I agree with, but if we begin to budget it next year, we will be able to upgrade the year after.
We didn't save 250,000. If we did it this year and next year, we would have saved 60,000, because we're a year behind and we don't get the upgrade until the second year of paying the premium. We deferred 191,000, negotiated 60,000 out. So the only thing we saved was the 60, and I'm not convinced we saved that in the end.
Well, I don't really agree with that addition, but the point is, look, I mean, the Board of Aldermen voted this budget last year. You could have, if you didn't agree with it, you could have added 250. You can add 191 this year. Now, this didn't come up as a big issue last year with the board. If you feel we should do this, you could add to the budget, and I certainly will take your feelings into consideration in the next proposal, but I can't change my proposal at this point. Now, maybe you're right, but that's not the judgment I made at the time I submitted the budget.
You want to add something, Mr.
I
Mansfield?
could just add something. Last year, I pulled out the $250,000. It was not going to be funded. I had conversations with Motorola, and at that point in time, we were just getting in and rolling out the system totally. I felt confident that we could do without it for that 1 year, and I believe at that budget meeting I had stated I had withdrew that out of there, and I was not going to push it. Now this year, we need to start really looking at this, because I'm afraid we're going to fall behind. The other part of this also is that if you don't upgrade, you can't get any new features. And I can tell you right now that the fire department is very eager, and that we've been looking at a new feature for the radio system that is going to benefit them for a safety issue. And that cannot be done until we upgrade to 717. So that's the other concern. You're losing, the longer you let delay this, you're losing technology, pretty much.
President McCarthy?
Yeah. If that doesn't get funded in the budget, it is my intention to introduce a resolution to transfer $200,000 out of the capital improvements budget and into citywide communications.
Alderman Siegel and then Alderman.
I'll defer to Alderman. I was just going to follow up on Alderman McCarthy. I wanted to know how many votes that's going to take.
That would take 8 unless it is vetoed.
Alderman Lopez?
I guess I'm just confused about what's transpiring because I thought the statement was that the Board of Aldermen had made a decision and we need to reconsider it. But as I'm hearing it, it sounds like we didn't have the opportunity last year because it was taken out of the budget before it came to us. And then this year, the same thing happened as well. So instead, our role is to add it to the budget? I just want to make sure I'm understanding this.
Alderman McCarthy.
Yeah, I think we're being asked to reconsider a decision we didn't make.
Okay.
It was in Mr. Mansfield's budget that was submitted. It was not in the budget that the mayor transmitted to us. We're being asked to reinstate it.
Well, my recollection is that last year, it was in the proposed budget to me, and it was reflected in the proposed budget, and that that I cut it, maybe after discussion with Mr. Mansfield, but I cut it, and it was reflected as a reduction that I made. So you were presented last year with the fact that there had been a recommendation for 250, and that amount was cut in the mayor's or my budget. And I think that's what happened. We could go back to the budgets and look.
Alderman Siegel, did you?
I see no purpose in trying to fund this at the budget process where you're going to try to override the cap with 10 votes, which isn't going to happen. But this is a necessary, we can't allow our communications to fall behind. I'm just mystified. This, to me, again, it's like the bond it and break it and forklift it and, oh.
Alderman Schoenman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding overriding the cap, it's not an override of the cap. We have a lot of room under the cap, right? Lots. So it's not a cap override. It is an increase to the budget, and it would take 10 votes.
Well, it would take 10 votes.
I
You're
will
right.
say that any time recently where there has been a strongly justified need to spend money, there's been easily 10 votes. We had 13 votes for the paving, easily. We had 15 votes for the school roofs. I don't think anyone objected to those things. The issue is not finding 10 votes for something good. The issue has always been finding 10 votes for things that aren't so good. And that's why we've done the 8-vote thing that we've done. Because it's easier to find 8 votes for some things that aren't fully justifiable than it is to find 10 for those things that are really justifiable. And it is easy to find 10 votes. My guess, and I won't actually speculate, but this sounds like a good expense to me. There are places that
I'm glad you think so.
we're probably spending money where we shouldn't be spending it, and that should not have happened. Should not have happened. But this is a place where we should spend it. Thank you.
Can I add something to this, Mr. Chair?
Mayor?
Well, look, my recollection is that we, and Alderman McCarthy has disagreed with this characterization, but that we saved $250 last year, and we deferred the upgrade by 1 year, and that I think I was making, or my impression was that I was making a similar decision this year, that we were deferring the upgrade for an additional year at a savings of $191. Now, as a partner in city budgeting, I always take the opinion of the Board of Aldermen pretty seriously. So if we'd had this discussion last year and there was this level of dissatisfaction with the deferral of the upgrade by 1 year last year, I might have included it this year, but I didn't. If you make a change and you fund it, I mean, I'm not going to argue with you over that. If you don't do it and we get to next year's budget, and having listened to your rather strong feelings on this subject, I expect I would include it in next year's budget. So this was my judgment at the time. You're saying it was not correct. Maybe you're right. But in any event, the way I was looking at it, I was kind of making a similar deferral to last year. We have 5 years to initiate it, and maybe that analysis was flawed, but that's the judgment I made when I submitted the budget.
Alderman McCarthy?
If we had funded it last year and we funded it this year, when would we get our upgrade?
It would have been after November of this year.
Okay, so it's after 2 years of payment of the number. So the, the reason, the reason we didn't do it last year was because we said, if we then do it in 2018 and 2019, that's about the right time for us to get the upgrade anyway. If we defer it out of this year, we'll be into 2020 before we can get the upgrade, and we'll still be substantially behind where the technology is. I think last year, I recall the conversation now, and because we were just getting the system fully up to speed, there wasn't any need to do the upgrade for probably 2 years, but that doesn't mean we can just stop and do it some year when we want to. We've got to be paying into it continuously to keep up with those. So I think the disconnect was, we should have understood last year that it really needed to be in this year's budget. That there was only a 1-year opportunity to save that cost. And like I say, we still would have had to pay $380,000 before we got the first upgrade. We wouldn't have paid $500,000 at the $250 price. So we did negotiate some of it down, but we still need to pay in 2 years worth of it. So I think that that needs to happen this year, because I totally agree that, you know, the forklift update strategy is just not a great idea.
Mayor?
Could we ask Mr. Cates his take on this? He's the emergency management director. We put him on the spot.
Of course. I think we ran ourselves into a bad situation a couple of years ago with the 2000 era radio system. I think what I'd like to see, and I think probably the rest of the stakeholders, including the public safety stakeholders, would like to see kind of a long-term strategy on cost to keep this system upgraded, and when do we see a drop-dead date? When does this system no longer have the ability to be upgraded? I think that long-term planning is going to be essential as we look forward to basically spending down the rest of the bond, and then also looking at what other technologies are out there 10 years from now. I think the biggest thing, though, is we need to ensure that we don't run ourselves into a situation where we only have 5 years left of maintenance, security upgrades, and infrastructure upgrades for the system. So I think regardless of what's decided by the committee, I think we need to look at ensuring that we can keep the system going beyond 5 years. That's my opinion.
Alderman Siegel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm going to make a motion to restore the $191,961 in line item 54407 in this budget.
Okay.
And
The motion on the floor is to reinstate the $191,961 into the line item 54407 software and maintenance in the citywide communications budget. Discussion? Alderman Siegel? Alderman Shoneman?
Thank you. I think that from a procedural standpoint, I think we were going to be saving all of our motions until we're done with all the reviews. I think that while it's not a spending cap override vote, and I do think it's a good expense, I think that we should be looking at trying to find something to trade. It'd be nice if we could leave the budget right where it's at and find $192,000 somewhere else. I think those, they might exist, might not get 8 votes for them, but I think those conversations are worth having, and I don't think we can have that now. If it comes down to voting on it, although I do support it, I won't vote for it now, because I think that we should have the conversation where we're making trades.
Alderman Siegel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that the case? I mean, I don't know that we ended up doing things at the very end.
I believe, and I'll defer to the president, that I believe at any time during these, you can make a motion and have it passed by the budget committee, we are gonna have wrap-up sessions, we are gonna have general sessions where we can have a further discussion on maybe even other motions to find the 191 somewhere else. But certainly, I think procedurally, unless I'm wrong, President McCarthy, that you can make the motion now.
Motion was in order.
Yeah, and not only that, but my recollection of being on the Budget Committee, and given that we're discussing it right now, it seems inefficient to have a list of resolutions that we may or may not want to change, and then we're going to go debate them completely out of the context that we wouldn't have, that we have now, with, especially with the people here that we have now. I just think it's more efficient to deal with it, although I do understand Alderman Schoeneman's point.
Alderman Wiltshire?
I understood his point as well, but I'm ready to vote on this tonight. It's that important.
Any others? Alderman Schoeneman?
I know it's completely inappropriate as a motion to make it. I will vote against it, although I'm in favor of it, because we need to have that balanced conversation, and I'll save those comments for later, and whatever happens later, happens later.
Alderman Siegel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we have that $200,000 Citizens Advisory Fund we might look towards for this as an example. So you might keep that in your mind going
Certainly will.
forward.
By the way, that discussion is scheduled for Thursday evening.
Understood.
Tune in Thursday.
Understood.
So tune in Thursday.
And that's all I have to say on
All
it.
right, any other discussion on the motion?
This is a roll call.
A roll call's been requested. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Alderman Wiltshire.
Yes.
Alderman McCarthy.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien is not here. Alderman Schoeneman, I'll vote no, as explained. Alderman Siegel.
Yes.
Alderman McGinnis is not here. And Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
It says Mayor Dowd
So,
here.
yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 to 1.
That is correct.
Motion passes.
4 to 1.
4 to 1. 1, 2, 3. You're right, 4 to 1. Okay.
And one last thing, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
might.
Alderman Siegel.
You know, I know it's very popular for people to watch these, say, oh my God, they're wastefully spending more money. Oh my Lord. But this is to avoid the forklift-style upgrades that we went through. And Mr. Mansfield was very detailed in his discussion of the incredible Rube Goldberg contraptions and the scouring of eBay for spare parts that we had to go through just to maintain our system in anticipation of finally getting it upgraded. So the longer we wait for this stuff, unfortunately, the harder it is to even accomplish it. That's all I need to say.
other
The
thing
motion's been dealt with.
The other thing I would point out is that these constant upgrades, one was already mentioned as a safety issue for the fire department, and I'm sure there are others that are either cost savings or have other ramifications that are savings in the long run, and the longer we delay them, the more susceptible our system is to having issues and not having the upgrades that make the system that much more effective. Okay. Alderman Lopez.
Just want to say, I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I appreciate the steps that were just taken, because as we noticed in discussing the wastewater treatment, it's a shock to people when you don't maintain a system and then suddenly you have to spend a lot of money to fix it. So I encourage any forward-thinking spending maybe a larger amount relative during the year, but saving money over the long term with planning is always a good thing.
Okay, so that motion passed. I have one additional question. How often do you check the antennas on the top of the Pennachuck Tower at Kessler Farm?
Matter of fact, those were just replaced. Everything was replaced up there, all the hardware and everything over the past, I want to say 10 months.
The reason I ask is there's something on the top of that tower that's rusting so bad, it's causing it to go over the sides and rust that entire tank, which the Pennachuck is going to have to paint, and that's not an inexpensive proposition. I don't know what's rusting up there, but I hope it's not our antennas or their mounts.
No, it's I think it's the whole unit on on the top, because it is coming down it's not just that one area, it's
That's
around
good.
the whole area around the top.
All right. All right. Mr. Mayor, that wraps up our department reviews, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your evening. So, unfinished business.
I'd like to take up one thing as unfinished business, and that is just the acceptance of 2 communications that were submitted during the meeting. So I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to accept 2 communications, both from the mayor. One is the position description for Ms. Kleiner, justifying the increase, or attempt to explain the increase, and the other is the mayor's summary proposed budget analysis.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to so far suspend the rules is to allow for the acceptance of 2 communications received after the agenda was prepared. No discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. New business?
None.
I don't think there's anything relevant that's on the table that anybody wants to bring up. Alderman you're getting ahead of me. General discussion? Alderman Schoneman?
Thank you. General discussion, going back to actually a conversation we had earlier about that position. And I share your view that we're setting a precedent for contracts that come up. We have to look at the precedent carefully, because if someone from a different department wants to become a department manager, you know, they can perhaps get a raise that would be larger. But if they simply take on more, then it's a hard sell, either direction. It's a very difficult situation. We continually hear when it comes time for union contracts, well, they got it, or so-and-so got it, therefore we should too. And there seems to be a lot of sympathy for that argument. And that's a never-ending argument. Every cycle, someone can come in and say, well, they got it, so I should get it too. And it's just, it never, ever ends. And I personally think that Ms. Kleiner's doing a great job. It's a hard job. She's doing a wonderful job at it. But it sets a precedent that I think causes us an unbelievable problem down the road typically. I just wanted to add that to the conversation that we had earlier. Thank you.
Alderman McCarthy?
I guess I don't see it that way, particularly in the mayor's office. Every time we change administrations, we change the definitions of how the positions work in the mayor's office. And the previous administration didn't have essentially a chief of staff position, had been doing things elsewhere in the budget that were similar to that. I think if the mayor wants to create that position and give it to someone, you got to look at what that position is worth. And that position is worth the salary that we're looking at now, not the one that the job that was described by the former mayor would have commanded.
Alderman Schoneman?
Thanks. I think it's an excellent point. That's only why I say we have to manage that very carefully when the time comes, because it's I like the argument. It makes sense. But we do have to manage that expectation whenever the time comes, because someone is going to create that argument and we have to be able to argue against it if it's an appropriate argument.
I've been dealing with budgets in one way or another for 30 years, and I don't recall unions ever holding up anything against the non-exempt salary structure. So I'm not sure that they could make apples and apples out of apples and oranges in this case, so.
The union versus the non-union structure, you would say?
Well, trying to compare that to make the unions get a similar.
There are clauses in the UAW contract that reference what we do with the merit employees. So there are places where we have that entanglement.
All right, I stand corrected on that one. All right, remarks by Alderman? Oh, there's no public comment because there's no public here. Remarks by Alderman? Seeing none, no need for non-public. Do I hear a motion? Alderman Siegel.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we're adjourned at 8:46.